victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Penasini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, knocked away from Trindle, Sharks coming through, none of them can hold this!
All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, and joining me is the big man himself, Sixties, Greg, my good mate, who is going to break down all of the Round 17 previews alongside me, as well as break down some pretty significant news out of Paradise that came out yesterday. But before we get there, mate, as always, checking on how you're doing, because we have a lot to talk about for the Parramatta Eels, but a bit on the side as well.
Yes, look, obviously it's been a very busy time for me personally, but we've got lots that we need to get through today, because not only do we want to talk about what's happened with the signings, but we've got 3 grades to preview. So it's going to be a very full podcast. It's like the usual trick where the day after we go with the news podcast, the big news drops with the Eels or even the NRL. It's just the way of the world.
It's written in the stars for the tip sheet that the Parramatta Eels will find a way to drop the major news after we record. Whether the news podcast gets bumped back to a Wednesday, the news will come out on a Thursday. On a Tuesday, it comes out on a Wednesday. If we record it on a Saturday, it'll come out on a Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it even comes out like an hour after we record.
There's been times where the bombshells dropped literally, like we've finished the record button, and we have to go, oh man, like we have to get back on and try and talk about this. Yeah.
So just in the meantime, before we start into that, just all the usual housekeeping, no matter what platform you're watching or listening to this on, if you could give it a like and subscribe, especially those that are watching on YouTube, because we're trying to get that YouTube subscription up to 1,000. We're climbing, we're getting great numbers on there, but we'd really appreciate your support in doing that. And of course, anyone that would like to get on board as a sponsor, or individuals, if you'd like to help out with Patreon, it's all greatly appreciated. We should thank as well our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, the OG of our sponsors, and of course the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club, for their great support, which I think we're now into our 5th year of partnering with Parramatta Leagues Club. So they have been great long-term supporters as well. And we should mention that on the 25th of July, that's round 21, when the Eels play the Broncos on a Friday night up in Brisbane, we are holding a TCT watch party in Sturlow's, our normal home inside Parramatta Leagues Club, Sturlow's Sports Bar. Come in there. It's free entry to join the Cumberland Throw. It's just us catching up with our mates, our followers, fellow Parramatta fans. The club's throwing on the $5 beer of the month, so you can get a nice cheap drink there. We're throwing out the free finger food for you as well. John and I will do a preview before the game. We'll keep it brief so that you can watch the game on the big screen. We might just do an instant reaction after the game. So we'll see. Let's hope it's a win as well, John. But we're just getting together, Eels fans, in there to enjoy each other's company, talk a bit of footy, have a bit of a feed, a drink, and enjoy creating a bit of atmosphere as we watch the Eels wallop the Brisbane Broncos in round 21. So we look forward to seeing you there. We're going to put the information out on our socials in the next day or two as well, just so that people are aware that it's on. But, yeah, come along and join us. We look forward to it.
Good shout. Shout. Yeah, normally we'd pivot straight into the preview podcast at this point, 60s, with the 3 games on the docket across Flegg Cup and, of course, the NRL. But like we said, there's some news that broke yesterday that has derailed this preview podcast and turned it to a reaction plus preview podcast. And I can't help but talk about news without shouting out a listener and reader on TCT and of course, a tip sheet as well in Ray Zammit, who actually tipped this news a few days ago. He was on one of our columns and said that we're signing a Dragons forward for 2 years. So he was ahead of the curve there. Well done to Ray. But yeah, breaking story from yesterday, 60s. I believe Michael Chammas was the lead on this one. And the Eels.
No, Ray Zammit was the lead.
Well, Ray Zammit was he was ahead of the curve, but the official credit going to Michael Chammas. So, but yeah, TCT
It was probably listening to the tip sheet and getting it off Ray Zammit.
But look, we laugh here. This is a serious matter because Eels have added us all are set to add a signing in the forward pack, and it's a controversial one. Parramatta going to the St. George Illawarra Dragons catchment to get Jack de Belin on what has been labelled a 2-year deal for the 34-year-old lock forward. The second year is a club option, 60s. But Jack de Belin, there is no easy way to sort of dance around this. Very controversial what happened off the field. He was found not guilty on a number of charges, and I believe one other charge was dropped when it came to that particular incident with a young lady. On top of that, he is in advanced age. 34 is certainly not young, although the aforementioned incident probably contributes to him being fresher than most 34-year-old forwards. He is in good form. The general consensus I've seen from Dragons fans is really upset that he's been allowed to leave. But
that's to put it mildly. They're some of the level of upset from Dragons fans is almost off the charts.
Yes, but I have also had feedback from female fans come to me and also to you about genuinely being upset about this acquisition, and I can't fault them. So let's sort of sort through this one, because this is a signing that is difficult to get behind in a vacuum. Can we rationalise it? Because we're not going to sit here and moralise about football, because while it would be nice to be able to have 30 elite athletes that are elite individuals off the field, we've seen increasingly that it's not just the Parramatta Eels, but all clubs are willing to make concessions when it comes to pursuing victory. Is this a case of the Eels making a concession, 60s? What's happening here with the Jack de Belin acquisition?
Okay, so you and I exchanged some messages yesterday and had a bit of a chat in our own, like how we immediately reacted. And I think in a microcosm, it was fairly reflective of what the supporter base, how they reacted, because we're not associated with the Dragons, so we're not on top of how does Jack de Belin fit in at the Dragons, what's he meant to them in recent times, what was the fallout from their perspective over what had happened in the past. So I think the immediate reaction, it was certainly our immediate reaction, was, how's this going to be for the culture that they're trying to create at the Eels? So we took a dim view of what had happened in the past and how that would be received by not just ourselves but fellow fans. We then sort of stepped away, looked at it from, okay, let's imagine that the off-field stuff hadn't happened. How do you view de Belin? And you go, he'll be 35 next year. Man, that's an old signing. And you can't help but do that. But then you look and you go, he's 34 this year, so that's not too different. How's he performing this year? Well, he's been performing outstandingly well for St. George. He features highly in the NRL listing for things like average meters.
He's up at like a 114-metre game, and I think his tackle rate is in the genuinely elite bracket, just below 95%. So he's playing, like from a football perspective, he is playing good football, and it seems like his game is aging well. So that is one half of the equation, I suppose you can look at and say, well, from a football perspective, it does seem like there is value to be had here. And from the club's perspective, a 1+1 in their favour gives them a lot more flexibility to cut ties if the football does fall off next year. And look, expecting 2 years of production out of him seems maybe a bit too optimistic, but there does seem to be some value there right now into next year, into 2026. But I suppose
and the contract is structured that way, that it's a club option for the second year.
Yes.
So the Eels have a number of young players, young middle forwards that are maybe who could be argued are a year away from being regulars in first grade, or even with some of the younger ones that are coming through, perhaps 2 years or more away from being regular first graders. And if you're talking about mentors, then you've got Junior Paulo at the club as a mentor. Then you're starting to talk about, I'm talking about as middle forwards. Would you classify Jack Williams as a middle forward or an edge forward? How do you look at, Jermaine Hopgood? He's relatively inexperienced even himself in that regard. So does it hurt to have another senior player in the club? Well, we just got rid of RCG because we didn't want two older, aging middle forwards in the different sort of game that Jason Rolls wants to play. But
the other thing too is
you look at
older,
Jack Belin, is he's got that, he's playing the modern game, Jack Belin.
And it was two older aging forwards on big money too, which is
and on big money. Yes. So now we start to talk about the contract side of things. My understanding is it's not a huge contract. The years suit Parramatta reasonably well if we think about it in that context of a mentoring role and having someone that's going to be there to help the transition of the younger forwards into becoming regular first grade experienced forwards themselves. And as I said, you also look at the production that he's getting in the way the game is now being played, and he's fitting the bill there. He's a mobile forward, and as you said, the number of years out of the game makes him not really 34 years of being brutalised out on the field, but reasonably fresh legs still for that age. Now, that's all those aspects, but now we come to the how does it fit with the background off the field? Now, you mentioned that when it came to the court case, that he was found not guilty of the charge, and there were two other charges which were dismissed. And it's my understanding that there are people involved in terms of the other, the prosecution side of things, the witnesses and people that are, have been found that they've got cases to answer for what transpired in the court case. So there's stuff that's either gone on or going on. But as far as the court case is concerned, that's done. He has nothing to answer for there. However, what he does have to answer for is the fact that in his relationship, he basically cheated on his wife. Now, he and his wife are still together. They've got a number of children. They've moved forward. Has that got anything to do with us? Well, I'm sure people would naturally feel it's still not a great look in terms of what you'd like at the club. But my mail out of the club is that they've absolutely done their due diligence. I think the club has been pretty straightforward in what they want to achieve in terms of a culture at the club. And you have to think that if they've done their due diligence, that if the coaches want him, that everything must have been ticked off on. And I guess what it becomes now is individually how fans feel about this. Do we, whether you like it or not, Jack de Belin is at the club. My personal stance on it is I can understand. I wasn't comfortable with him as a signing. I think if it was Jack as an individual standalone signing, I'd like to see more from the club in the way of signings, because I think we need to we definitely need to sign more than Jack as far as middle forwards are concerned. If they were just saying this is our recruitment for next year, you'd probably go, really? That's it? I don't think it will be the case. I think we're going to hear news out of Parramatta over the next few days, and then moving forward of additions to the roster and contract news within the club with people that are still there. So it's not going to be a signing in isolation. So if it's not a signing in isolation as far as what our needs are, and it's a signing to add to the football squad, the depth, the experience, the mentoring, I can accept that as a football perspective. I'm not entirely comfortable about the background, but Jack's not going to be the first rugby league player that's had a background that people aren't comfortable with. And I guess it's up to him as to who he shows himself to be once he's with the club. And we judge him based on that. So that's where I'm at, John. What about yourself?
That is largely where I'm at too. And I do want to stress that if you are a female supporter of the Parramatta Eels and you are uncomfortable with this signing, then I do not judge you. I think you have every right to be frustrated, regardless of where you stand on the not guilty or charges quashed side of things. There is just a public perception side of this, isn't there, 60s, where it can just feel bad. And again, as a bloke, I'm in a different position. But yeah, if you are a female supporter and you feel uncomfortable, don't feel bad about feeling uncomfortable. As I sort of I let off with 60s, football, it always has been, but maybe even more so than ever, it's about the wins. And that is where a lot of these transactions are going to be judged. Does Jack de Belin help the Eels win more in 2026 and 2027 perhaps? That is something we have to wait and see. I will give a vote of confidence, maybe not the right word, but the benefit of the doubt. That sounds too weak on the other side, but I feel like Jason Riles and what we're doing in recruitment underneath him deserves at least some confidence. And if he believes that a 34-year-old forward can still give the Eels value, then I am willing to sit here and watch next season. And maybe he could even be a mid-season transfer, I guess. We've got to wait and see. We play the St. George Illawarra Dragons this year, but that could maybe be on the cards next week. Who knows? Have to wait and see there.
It would be interesting, John. The other thing too, and I don't think maybe my short-term memory's going, but I don't think we mentioned in the podcast so far. We had a bit of a chat about it before we started recording. That it's my understanding that there is no background between either Jason Riles and Nathan Brown and their connections with the St. George club.
It's not a job for an old mate.
No. They apparently they haven't had anything to do with Jack de Belin at St. George. Their paths never crossed in their respective times at the club.
That lends credence to the idea that this signing, at least from a football sense, has been done in a vacuum rather than with biases shaping the process, which is good. Look, again, my sort of closing stance on this is if you are uncomfortable with this signing, then I understand and I do not judge. If you're being pragmatic about the signing, you have to wait and see. You could lean towards being skeptic or skeptical about how much value an elder forward can add. But because of the off-field stuff, he is probably in a better position than most other 34-year-old forwards to be a value add-on to the Parramatta Eels on the football field. Beyond that, just trying to catch my thought here because I did have something. I swear I did. But yeah, beyond that, I suppose we wait and see. I did have something else to tack on, but now my brain has just let me down. Look, you don't have to sit here and be positive about it, but I suppose you are hopeful now that de Belin is an important add-on. The squad is lacking in that experience. 60, you did mention that. Junior really the only experienced middle in the squad right now. Jack can add a lot of value in that regard, being an on-field mentor to the players and sort of just providing the ability to know where to be in those big moments. But
yes,
yeah.
And of course, we base this on the fact that there is a big cloud over the future of both Sean Lane and Ryan Madison.
Yeah, exactly. So two more of your genuinely experienced. I mean, Sean Lane hasn't been part of the squad for a while now due to stuff beyond everyone's control here, which we're not going to comment on because of the nature of it. We believe it to be mental health, and that's with Sean just to be the best for himself there. But Ryan Madison, A, the club has been linked to shopping him around, but B, he's now got a spinal injury. So there's a lot of, I suppose, question marks about where his position in the squad is long term. So, yeah, we do need an experienced hand. And the question, I suppose, the counter question would be is, was there better on the market? Josh Papali'i's name is one that comes to mind for me, 60s. That could have been a pretty handy tack on there. Maybe they go and get Josh too, who knows? But they've gone for Jack Belin right now. And the biggest positive from a football perspective is the reaction from St. George fans, Craig, where they are genuinely upset that he is leaving, or at least a large contingent of them are genuinely upset. You look at the football stats, they're still strong. So there is clearly value on the football field. The question is, how much can the Eels roll that out into 26 and beyond?
Yes. So interesting. I did see one of the more colourful St. George
I had
supporters.
A couple of colourful videos sent to me.
Yes,
people
the reaction,
squashing sunglasses and getting upset. Yeah.
Yes. And basically linking in to the people that are want out of St. George, and it's a lot of it seems to be around the current coach's style. I think we were all expecting that this was going to be an outcome of Shane Flanagan taking on the coaching role at St. George, in that his character seems to be one that will not resonate well with some people, resonate well with others. He's achieved some results in the past. He is taking a little while to achieve results this time. It'll be interesting because, if the club needs a bit of a clean out, then a clean out has to happen. We've seen it with the Eels, with the number of players that have now either moved on at the end of last year or have already been moving on during the season this year, or are expected to move on at the end of the season that we're in at the moment. So, John, the other thing that we should really touch on quickly is the strong rumours and media attention that's now on Talon De Silva.
That's intensified the last 24 hours, yeah.
It has really intensified. It feels as if it's not unlike what's happened with Lockie Galvin, in that all of the focus is on the player in question coming to the Eels. Now, Talon De Silva's probably not quite as high profile from a media perspective as Lockie Galvin was, and it certainly hasn't been a case of nastiness playing out in the media in that regard, although there's a few rumours that have floated around with regard to how the particular parties feel about the current situation. However, all that said, I'm reluctant to say it, but all of the mail that's being sent to me is following on the same pattern as Lockie Galvin.
To be fair, your Galvin mail was right up until the 11th hour, where the Dogs sprung the all-time upset.
There was, everyone knew where things were apparently heading, and it was literally, as you said, the 11th hour. What we do know is that the mail around Talon's interest at the club has been there almost as long as that Galvin mail was there. It was coming to me not long after the Galvin mail started. It's only intensified. He's been up at Kellyville for lower grade matches because he has mates in the Parramatta pathways. So he's been going and supporting his mates, but he's been a face up there at Kellyville since Kellyville's opened. Most people like to put two and two together just seeing a player at another club's matches, but it happens, that side of it actually happens more than people would realise because of mates playing at other clubs relatives playing at other clubs. There's a whole lot of reasons why a player will be there watching lower grade games, or even in some instances, first grade games at other clubs. So you can make of it as you will, but he has been there. So we'll see. It's something that I reckon, because we're so close to June 30, we might get information on it sooner rather than later. And
There was
the
a
way
big article
the
from
media.
James Hooper yesterday talking about the potential for a June 30 transfer for Talon de Silva. So
Yes.
And we mentioned something similar with Jack de Belin, where especially in de Belin's case, I feel like where you're signing an elderly forward, you'd want him this year for the extra value add-on. But Talon's situation, more about maybe not being happy under the Marshall structures there and being forced to sit behind an admittedly very talented Apisai Coruscant, but a more advanced in age Apisai Coruscant too, who is now, I think, 32, 33.
Yes.
Appy is no longer the spring chicken he once was, still playing good football, but Talon obviously hungry for more minutes. And coming to Parramatta would mean a time split with Riley Smith, but a far more positive split of minutes compared to where he is at the Tigers, where I think he sat for 80 minutes on the bench last week. I think he didn't play. He was on the team but didn't play, which is crazy business.
Yes. And look, the Eels would have two dummy halves of very different styles with those two players. So if you're talking about carrying both, you'd probably be talking about complementary styles so that they could play a different role in the time that they're on the field. You wouldn't just be replacing like for like. If you're replacing like for like, you then think to yourself, why would you have two players who are almost identical in what they provide? You just have the one player.
There's contrasting thoughts there, because you do want to do some roster mirroring to some degree and have options below that allow you to replace the guy that's above in case of injury or suspension, and you'd have an industrious hooker to replace Riley Smith in that case. But if you're talking about your top 17 roster building, then you want contrasting styles. You want
exactly. You might have a depth signing, as you said,
is
mirrors.
a mirror signing. But for the top 17 bouncing, then you'd want to have Riley being your industrious, high work rate, high kick pressure, 1% dummy half. Not to say you don't want Talon doing the 1%ers, but Talon comes on and he's your spark plug, attacks the ruck, gets really open with how he can attack the defensive framework of the opposition. So, I think that's what you're looking at here. I think that is a really nice blend between the two dummy half styles. And if Talon does come on board, it obviously changes our bench composition pretty significantly between how Dylan Walker can be used and where Joash Papali sort of falls there. But that's not to say that Joash can't be part of the starting team elsewhere, right? He's putting his hand up for those number 6 responsibilities as well.
John, the other thing too is that what we're seeing at the moment is a revolution in the interchange bench and its construction.
Mm-hmm.
Gone are the days, I think, where teams would look to have 4 forwards.
Yeah, you'd have 4 big beefcakes on the bench and you'd pound the opposition. You have the Swiss Army knife is sort of the bench, isn't it? You got guys that can cover in Dylan Walker between the halves, obviously lock forward, but the centres. Joash Papali is now there for the Parramatta Eels. He goes from 1-6 through the centres and wing, a little bit of number 9 as well. So, you want your utilities there, and then your forwards that are on there tend to be guys that can play across the back row and the middle and even out into the centres.
Yes.
And
so you can even have it's not just your interchange rotation. It can be your rotation of the players who are on the field who almost started to look right Madison, who could move between being a middle or an edge player, so that workload would change by virtue of a positional change during the game. And if you could probably get by with 1 to 2 middles on the bench now, where it seemed that before the minimum was 3 middles on the bench to allow for those interchange. You have that high mobility, high work rate middle forward that seems to be the trend these days. And as I said, I think we're seeing a real revolution in how the interchange is structured. John, I think we should probably get on with the...
Just a casual
preview.
half an hour chat about recruitment and retention here. But
Yes.
let's get into the preview section, ladies and gentlemen. And if you've been persisting for us talking about Jack de Belin and Talon de Silva, we do appreciate that. 3 games on the docket for the Parramatta Eels. It's a triple header, but it's not a triple header because it's across 2 different venues. But Eels taking on the Dragons across the Flegg Cup and NRL. Kicking off at 11 o'clock a.m. at Croom Road Sporting Complex in Croom. I'm shocked that, wait, it's spelled differently though. What? It is Croom, C-R-O-O-M-E, Road Sporting Complex in Croom, C-R-O-O-M, no E. What's going on? What's going on, Wollongong? But the Eels...
It's got to be a typo, hasn't it?
Surely. The Eels taking on the Dragons here in the under-21s. Parramatta come into this game 60s.
You know what it reminds me of? Maxwell Smart. It's not the craw, it's the craw. The craw.
Eels come into this game having dropped their last 2 games against both the Warriors and more recently the Newcastle Knights on the back of a landslide of errors, has seen them drop outside the top 4 for the first time in a long time in the Flegg, enter this round in 5th with the Dragons on their heels in 8th. But Eels have a couple of changes to their roster. Cameron Bambutt back this week. I'm not sure if it was injury or suspension that had him out last week, 60s, but he has the number 1 on his back. Moe Alamadine and Dom Ferrugia are on the wings. Good to see Dom getting into the 21s here. Tavaka Palu and Antioch Vitala-Mariner are in the centres. Lorenzo Talatano, a partner Josh Lynn in the halves. Damascus Nemia and Bo Lucian starting front rows. We touched on this on Team List Tuesday 60s, but no Damascus Nemia, who was the captain last week. We believe he...
Tianka
Brown. Sorry, Big T. Confusing both you and Damascus because you're both in great form. But no Big T this week, who we believe got banged up in the second half of that game, 60s.
Yes,
and we have to wait and see how long he is out for, but that is a loss to the playing stocks of the Eels. Big T in great form this year. Jack Hudson, though, he is playing dummy half. Dom Destratus missed last week. He returns on the edges this week, another big in for the Parramatta Eels. And speaking of big ins, New South Wales under-19s rep Josiah Funo Ayuta is back in action for the Blue and Gold after narrowly going down to the Queenslanders in a very entertaining game up on the Gold Coast. Then you got Ieti Samuelu locking out the forwards. On the interchange, Paddy Spence, Tom Summer, Chris Petrus, and Ryder Talangi. A very young trio of players there who are having a good little stint in the Flegg. And speaking of young players, Trace Beattie and Isaac Jim are part of the extended roster alongside Kobe Herford. So 18, 20, and 22 for Beattie, Herford, and Jim in that order. Jim, too big for the normal jersey 60s. Even when he was in the starting team, he had the 22 on his back. He is a sizable human being. And
as those numbers are now becoming known as the lotto numbers.
The lotto numbers, yes.
Once you start to get up in the the 20s. John, 10 players in that team list who were part of the SG Ball 2025 squad, as I see it. So it's a measure of what's happened with the team over the course of this season, that injuries, promotions, provision of opportunities for SG Ball players sees the SG Ball side now dominate team selections in this grade. So that's interesting in itself. Of course, we are seeing the team struggle in recent weeks. And I think last week we reached a tipping point in terms of inexperience, errors, injuries through the game that led to that loss to the Knights, because the Eels are a better team than what the Knights are, and they couldn't get the job done because of those sorts of factors. It'd be interesting to see how Patrick Spence is used this week, John, because he's ended up starting games.
He's been starting both 9 and 13. So it's not just a singular position here. He's got a bit of flexibility there. And we've seen Jordan Rankin move him around like a chess piece at times.
I think the balancing act coming in, watching the last few weeks, is that they could argue that Jack Hudson offers quite a bit of strike power in his work out of dummy half. However, I think Paddy is better defensively, like from a physical perspective. And nothing wrong with what Paddy does in attack either. And he's a converted fullback. We talk about players in the halves who are converted into a dummy half. Paddy's been converted from a fullback or sometime outside back into playing in the dummy half role. And he's met that challenge with reshaping his frame to be able to handle those physical rigours of playing either dummy half or lock. And I think maybe because of that, there's been that preference for him to start. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Cameron Bamblett was probably playing some of his better football before we didn't see him last week. I would argue that there were a couple of games that he played in Jersey Flegg that were better than any performance that he put in the SG Ball. And he had quite a good season in SG Ball. That was, I think, how well he adjusted to coming up into Jersey Flegg. You mentioned Dom Ferrugia getting his first run for the Jersey Flegg team this year. So it'll be interesting to see how Dom goes. Dom himself is a physical specimen out on the wing because he's got that tall athletic frame and powerful frame that you want from wingers these
Great
days.
aerial ability as well.
Yes, so be interesting to see how he goes. Lorenzo had to move around a bit last week as a result of the injuries that happened during the game. Yes, I think Lorenzo's got that individual brilliance that maybe there might be occasions where his teammates aren't quite sure what he's going to do.
Or ability to have the same playing speed as him because he processes the field so quickly at times where he sort of just almost like, I'm just trying to think because the comparison people make is Jerome Luai. I think there's a little bit of James Tedesco there too, back in his prime, where just, pinballing and cannonballing off players and creating chaos and then being able to quickly identify the gap that is created because of his ability to break that tackle or tackles. He will break tackles and gluts and runs. But yeah, very exciting prospect and a player, again, that going back to our chat with Jim Sarantinos, he mentioned that the club has made moves to get him under lock and key for the next few years.
Yes, and it's good to see Dom Destratus back this week. Had the little bit of a groin abductor issue.
That's our guy right there, though. Dom having a fantastic season. And I think it was actually in line for a cup run last week, Sixties. His name was on the team sheet at one point, but the injury obviously hobbled him to the point where he couldn't play. And, yeah, enjoying himself a fantastic year. A player you got to think that the coaches love, Sixties, from what he does on the field. You talk about those 1%ers, talk about being in the right place, the right time, the effort plays. Dom does all of that, and he also adds some really nuanced line running on the edges.
Yes. There's also, I wanted to mention Yeti Samuelo because he's had a great season. We got him from the Warriors.
The Warriors,
didn't we?
Yeah.
When we played the Warriors the other week, it was interesting because I had Warriors players sitting behind me in the seats at Kellyville, and he was sitting with the Warriors players cheering Parramatta in the New South Wales Cup game that followed immediately after, which was interesting because I knew I had all these Warriors players behind me, and I could hear cheering for Parramatta at different points in the Cup game, and then turn around to see that it was Eddie that was sitting amongst them.
Another player that's had a really good year, hasn't he? Been a fantastic pickup, really physical. I've used the terms fire and brimstone for him. When he came off the bench for the first half of the season, really aggressive, being promoted to a starting role in recent times and handling that really well too. So good pickup there for the Flegg.
Yes, and just quickly on some other players, I think Tom Summers really adjusted well to Jersey Flegg. Chris Petrus, physically, he just fitted in so easily last week, and albeit in a losing team, he didn't let himself down in any way. Expect him with his age. I think I'd be stunned if he didn't feature in the PNG representative team this year. I'm talking about in the junior PNG team.
Yeah, so up against the Australian schoolboys.
Yes, So I think Joey Grimer might be all over that.
Maybe he'll feature in the senior PNG team if he keeps it going.
Who knows? But I reckon Joey Grimer's all over
Joey,
that.
we had a chat with him the other week too, and he's all over Chris Petrus. Yeah, he has him in a little black book there. And another player that I believe on Talking Para, Jim Sarantinos revealed that he'd been signed up for a number of years too, which is a fantastic move. Hard to believe. There are players you see, and I mean, Sam Tuivasa was one of them. Josiah Funayuta too, in his time recently. When you see him as first-year SG ball players, you see him go on to play Flegg and play rep football, and you're like, there is no way they're first-year SG ball players. And Chris Petrus is another one. He is so big and so well-built and really came together as a footballer in the back half of that ball season. It's hard to believe he's got another year of eligibility in the under-19s.
Yes, exactly. And another player that fits into that category is Ryder Talangi. And Ryder Talangi, he is that much bigger in maybe even in 6 months. Seeing him out there, he's as physically imposing as some of the more seasoned Flegg players. I thought he did really well physically last week.
He had a good game last week too, yeah. And again, it's like Sam Tuivasa, isn't it, 60s? Every time we saw him in the last couple of years through the reps, you see him every month or so with our chats with Steve Rojalis, and just felt like he'd grown another inch, put on another 3 kilos. Ryder's like that too. He's just in that explosive development phase where still got a bit of growing to do in his like final growth spurt at under 19s, but rounding into that full-time footballer, isn't it? Where the weights program and the dietary stuff really starting to manifest, and he just gets bigger and bigger and more well-built and more well-built. So good to see Ryder finding his feet in the Flegg. And yeah, just a ton of SG ball players pushing in here. Maybe
Trace Beatty, Isaac Jim, extended list. Kobe's been around for a while. Kobe Herford, he's another pathways player there. So real good mix there, John.
Has all the new faces been part of the reason why there's been a slump in the last 2 weeks? 60s. There've been, I would argue, the biggest issue has been just a lack of concentration and a lack of, I suppose, aptitude when it came to ball handling. They've gifted both the Knights and the Warriors so many opportunities to attack their goal line. And to their credit, they fought back in both games. Like they narrowly went down in both games, and which is a testament to the amount of talent in the squad that even with the handicap that they're putting on themselves, with the boost they're spotting their opposition, they're still highly competitive. But why are they dropping the ball suddenly? Like, what's gone wrong?
Okay. I see there's several factors at play. Those errors have been there during the season because I've spoken about that before. I've said when they hit points in a game where they start to give away momentum, they need to look in the mirror because they've been really basic errors. It could be errors off a kickoff, a simple hit up, inviting the opposition back into the team. They lose momentum for a period of time, but then there's so much talent in the team. They regain that momentum and they get the win. What's happened over the last few weeks, there's a whole lot of factors that have come in. Those errors have still been there. There's maybe been a few more of them. They've got a lot of new faces in the team, which you expect when SG ball players come into the squad. It's not a bad thing to have new faces come into the team. And I don't point the finger at any of those new faces in terms of, are they the reason for the loss? I'd point more at missing players, be it through injury or elevation. So there's been key players that are missing. Dom Destratus missing last week was huge out. The impact that he has on an edge and his ability to be shifted around even into the centres if something's going wrong in a game can't be underestimated. Then you also talk about Matthew Hunter, their captain, and he's been elevated to New South Wales Cup, and his absence is a huge factor in that team. And then this week you throw in the fact that the replacement captain in Tiankum Brown is also out injured, and he's a big factor in the middle of the park. I'm not quite sure how this game will go, John. I'm edging towards the Eels because I think I said just grabbed a couple of quick words with Jordan Rankin just walking past him last week. He obviously wasn't happy about the result. He's a very calm communicator as a coach. And I'm sure there will be a strong message there, firstly, not just about the errors, but the lack of focus that seemed to happen during that game last week. I'm sure he'll get them on the right track, but are they still missing too many key players? There's a couple. I'm not happy about Matthew Hunter being not in the team. I'm happy about him being in New South Wales Cup, but
important way to frame
being
that is
out
that,
this
yeah,
team.
exactly. If you're looking at it purely from the Flegg perspective, you're unhappy. But macro picture, obviously, Matty Hunter being rewarded for a fantastic individual season and doing great things up in the Cup now. So, yeah, we're not unhappy on the balance of things. But for the Flegg,
Yes.
tough out.
Yeah.
I do look at this team and I just see so much talent still, 60s. It is actually crazy to be so down on your troops through various manners, through promotion, injury, suspension, and still have such a talent-rich team, which speaks to how well-positioned the SG Ball and the Flegg are cumulatively. Yeah. If they
And I'm wondering also, where's Will Lewis? Because he was elevated to New South Wales
scored a
Cup
try,
last
yeah.
and scored a try.
Could
and
be
then
a late inclusion, could be injured.
Maybe he got injured in New South Wales Cup last week.
Yeah.
It would just seem strange that he's elevated to New South Wales Cup last week, scores a try, and then we don't see him in any grade this week.
Yeah.
So you'd have to think that it must be an injury
I
there.
can't recall
but John,
a suspension incident, so look, I know the club is beholden to the sort of like sub rules between these grades, but geez, it'd be nice to have suspension injury reports for these grades. And no club really does it because of the way the competitions work, but it does make the discourse so difficult around these previews. And when people ask us, hey, why is X player not playing? Sometimes we've seen that, like with Bradley Avery, who was an absentee in this team list, he had a nasty knee injury against the Newcastle Knights. Don't know the scope of the knee injury, but I do know he got hurt, so we can tell him that. But
and also similarly with Tianka Brown.
What happened to Tianka Brown, the team's captain last week? Did he get a hammy? Was it a groin? Was it a concussion? Don't know. I can't tell you. And I know the clubs, again, are beholden to the competition rules there, and they can't give out these things, but, geez, it makes it tough.
Yeah, it does. But, look, I'm still going to stick with our Eels to win this
back
one.
the Eels. And, look, it would be very difficult to drop a third straight game, but the Dragons are a top 8 contender. So you got to keep that within considerations. They're also on the road, the Blue and Gold this week. It's a tough road trip out to Shell Harbour. And Croom and Croom are different 60s. While we'll chat and how to look at that. So, I don't know why there is a Croom with an E road in Croom with no E, but maybe there's like two different people, one named after the Croom no E's and one named after Croom with the E's. It's a story as old as Romeo and Juliet.
Maybe it is, and maybe if it's named after people that might have been part of the same family back in the day, like going way back, there would be different spellings of a particular surname. Yeah. I know that with some of my ancestors, the Grono family, there was Grono, Grono, and then there was Grono, Gronow, and it just ended up, but they're all like same family, same family tree. So that's just how it was back in the day. So anyway,
backing our Eels at Croom Road on Croom, but moving into the New South Wales Cup now, as we go through this not quite a triple header. This one, the actual curtain raiser out at Wynn Stadium, 60s, big one here between second and third on the ladder. The St. George Illawarra Dragons hosting the Eels as the top seed in this contest. 3:10 p.m. kickoff at Wynn Stadium. On pure draw and ladder position, this should have been an absolute banger, 60s. 2v3, chance to really consolidate position at the top of the ladder. Eels, however, doing it tough, doing it real tough. But we look at their team list here. Arpa Twaddle at fullback, Liam Scolari and Samuel Louise are on the flanks. Araz Namva and Bo Newlands are in the centres this week. We mentioned him before, but Matty Hunter continues his run up at New South Wales Cup level, and he'll partner Ronald Volkman in the halves. Wittemu Greg and Tony Mattielli are the two bookends. Brennan Hands drafted into the starting position at dummy half this week again, because Joey Lussick has got expanded responsibilities in the NRL with that Riley Smith suspension. Tyrese Lakini, another young gun, getting another start here on the edges. Good to see Tyrese sort of marking out some territory here in this grade. Well done, young man. And Dan Keir's on the other edge here, and we'll have the C next to his name, I believe. Saxon Pryke, another young player, enjoying a very good season playing lock forward this week. So a few young players in that starting team, 60s, Twyedle, Nanva, Louisu, Hunter. We got Lakini and Pryke there as well. And also Tony Mattielli, who is certainly not an old hand by any means. So even with all that depth issues we're having right now, still young guns getting a chance to show their wares. Move to the bench now, though. Interesting. Got two dummy half options here in Manny Luke and Cruz Natalie Schmidt. Cruz can also play a bit of back row too, 60s. So I wonder if that's more his projection this week. And then you got Will Latu returning from an MCL sprain. Great to see him back in the fold. And then Ken Kalachi, another one of the real stalwart players this year for the New South Wales Cup level. So despite all the outs, still plenty of our solid players there, but they are taking on a very good St. George Illawarra squad, 60s. Ramsey, Sloan, Finau, Glover, Laurie, Molo, Fatala Mariner, Sele. We just saw Jacob Halangahu dominate for New South Wales on the edges at the under-19s game recently. There's another Finau there, Murdoch Masilla. Like, they've got a huge blend of experience and explosive youth in this squad. It is going to be a tough matchup for the Parramatta Eels. And they versed the New Zealand Warriors, the best team in the competition, 2 weeks ago or 2 games ago, and really acquitted themselves well with a similar roster that was banged up and impacted by injury and suspension and NRL call-ups. They fought tooth and nail in that game, were outclassed in the final 20 minutes. Is that what's going to happen here? Because the draw has been really cruel to the Eels here. In 2 games that should have been absolute barn burners, where the Eels had a chance to flex their premiership credentials in this grade, they instead...
Slobber knockers, John, even?
Slobber knockers, barn burners. That's what these games should have been. And to their credit, the Eels battled hard against the Warriors, but they were far from their best. And that was because of player personnel issues. I think that's the case here again, where they're taking on a red-hot St. George team. There is no 7 named for the Dragons, but that would be Lachlan Ilias, who I believe will drop back to this grade. And Ilias and Glover have been in awesome form in this level for the Dragons. Big part of the reason why they're so high up on the table. But they've got NRL. I mean, Tyrell Sloan is playing wing this week, 60s. Like, you talk about a luxury of riches in this grade. The Eels are absolute beggars right now with guys. And to their credit, Scolari and Newlands have done a good job coming into the grade. But the Eels are calling on Ron Massey Cup players. The Dragons are dropping NRL players to this grade. Just two sides of the coin, isn't it?
Absolutely. And again, you mentioned that the players that are getting that job done out in the back line, especially those who at the start of the season would have been named in New South Wales Cup. Question 2, is it Felix that is Cruz's other brother?
Felix is the other brother who is more of a primary back rower. Cruz is the dummy half, but I believe he can also play on the edges.
Yeah, because Felix has been called on this year, and I thought had done not too bad a job when he's been called up. And I think Felix might have also played in one of the trials at the start of the season.
You might be right about that.
And performed quite okay out on an edge. So, John, looking at it, Matty Hunter did a great job last week. 2 tries, and 1 try assist. Yep, very good game. Instrumental in the Eels jagging a win against the Knights. I look at the team and probably there's a bit of strength there in the spine. Arpa Twyedle, Matty Hunter, Ronald Volkman, and Brendan Hands. Aside from that, you've also got a pack where you've got a little bit of experience, plus you've also got rising stars there. You've got some consistent performers. You couldn't get more consistent than Dan Keir. It's why he gets called up to NRL. It's why he's been part of the Eels system now for a number of years, is that he's a high-effort, high-energy player. Anytime, any pack that he's in, you know that they're going to be working hard. Saxon Pryke, we spoke about him the other week, his physicality is rising, and I thought he made a real presence of himself recently. Tony Mattielli, he got his debut just a few weeks ago, had a bit of suspension issues.
Him and Woody both spent some time on the Pine with, was it the South Sydney game? What was the I can't remember which game it was, but they both got a couple of weeks for their efforts in that particular game.
Yeah. So they're the starting bookends. I'm not sure where Brock Parker is. He must be out injured again. We're talking about updates on players at that level.
If they pick up a niggle or like a late charge from the MRC, we just have no information. Obvious injuries we can cover you guys for, but there is stuff beyond our vision.
Yeah. So as you said, interesting bench composition with ostensibly 2 dummy halves there when we already have a dummy half in Brendan Hands. We've been really looking forward to Will being able to get back on the field on a consistent basis and maybe even push for higher experience. But we just got to get him back consistently on the field. And Kane Kalashi has been one of the more consistent players as well. So, John, I think the main strength lies with the Eels forwards and spine. Can they get the job done? As you said, really tough ask. What have the Dragons won? Is it something like 8 in a row or
something along that vein? They are really, alongside the Warriors, in terrific form. If I just pull up their win-losses here. So they come into this game having beaten the Magpies, smashing the Panthers, a bye, just getting past the Knights, beating the Raiders, the Bears, the Jets. The Magpies, again, they smashed them. They smashed Manly. And then the last loss, funnily enough, was against the Warriors. So they got beaten pretty handily there, 40-12. Not too dissimilar to what the Eels had against the Warriors recently, although, again, Parramatta playing for crippled roster in that game. But these two teams did draw back in round 5, by the way, 60s. So that when they were both at full strength or close to, that was where they're at, evenly matched. And
yes,
it goes back to the notion that this should have been such a great game on paper. 2v3, 2 aspiring contenders to the Warriors. And instead, Dragons, they've dropped back NRL plays because Flanagan's culling at the top level here, and the Eels, crippled by injury, suspension, and just some bad luck, calling upon some of their RMC depth options, who, again, not to discredit those guys, they're doing a solid job, but it's just reflective of the 2 different rosters in the state they find themselves in coming into round 17.
Yeah. So, John, I'm going to tip a narrow win to the Eels here.
I like the positivity, mate. If they're going to get it done, it's going to be tight. You can't see them smashing the Dragons. And realistically, I think that if you're putting your money on this game, it's probably a Dragons win. But I don't think the Eels go away lightly here, mate. If they're not going to cow down to the Warriors, given the roster issues between those 2 squads back then, I can't see them letting themselves be blown off the park by the Dragons. I think they're going to fight tooth and nail here. I think Nathan Kalis really has his boys up for this season. So in that vein, head says Dragons, heart says Eels.
Yeah, look, I think we've got the edge on them in the spine. Honestly, I do. And with how instrumental the spine is in engineering wins, I think the Eels can create opportunities. The only thing that I'm concerned about might be how we defend out wide with just that little bit of inexperience in comparison to some of the players that are playing for the Dragons there. So I think we'll hold them through the middle. I think we'll create opportunities ourselves. How we defend out wide will be the question mark that I'll have for what will determine the win. Okay, John, that brings us now to the main game, the Eels versus the Dragons in NRL. And we've been hit by the injury and suspension stick.
Man, what's new, baby? What's new? Yes. Parramatta Eels, we took the MRC to task on Tuesday. We both were pretty forwards and not being backwards about how we felt about the situation. And the Eels, rocked by a couple of suspensions to Will Penasini and Riley Smith. Jason Riles, I joked on Team with Tuesday 60s in my post that it must have been blasting Coldplay this week because when he took this job, no one ever said it was going to be easy, but no one ever said it was going to be this hard either. So a bit of the scientist there, and he's certainly making lemonade out of lemons right now. And the Eels take on the Dragons. It is, if I check my ladder here, that is the wrong ladder. This is the right ladder. It's 11 v 15. So St. George coming to this one on the cusp of the top 8, but so too are the Parramatta Eels because they're 5 wins apiece. St. George do have their third bye banked right now, so they're actually ahead of the Eels on terms of competition points. But and they do have that game in hand because of it. But the Eels, they've still got that 2 points prospectively waiting for them next week. When I say prospectively, it is waiting for them, absolutely. So two teams on level pegging right now. So the congestion ladder wild. But the Dragons come into this one for the 5:30 p.m. kickoff out at Wynn Stadium, looking like this. Former Parramatta Eels captain and club legend Quinton Gufferson at fullback for them. Also the C for the Dragons there. Corey Allen onto the wing this week in place of, I just mentioned him, but the Tyrell Sloan dropping there. He'll be opposite Christian Tuipulotu, with Moses Sully and Valentine Holmes in the centres. Lycan King Togia, talented young 5'8" full partner Kyle Flanagan in the halves. Emre Gula, Damien Cook, and David Clemmer are there. Well, we talked about Jack Belin being the senior citizen. That front row is not too far off being a retirement home there. Toby Couchman, Jaden Sewer, and Jack DeBellin in the back row there for the Red V. Jacob Little, Hamish Stewart, Viliami Fafita, and Luciano Lillard on the interchange. So Couchman and Stewart giving a couple of young players a chance there at the Dragons. So a bit of youth balancing off against all those elderly players. Then on the interchange, or extended interchange, the reserves, Loco Pasifiki Tonga, Locke Nilius, Blake Laurie, Nick Sugranis, and Nathan Lawson. And the Dragons come into this one on the back of, this is the Parramatta Eels, they're going to tell me anything. Before I get to the Eels gang or team very quickly, 60s, the Dragons come into the back of this one on that derby loss to the Sharks and getting trounced by the Dolphins in round 14. So they've gone loss, bye. Another team, by the way, facing the Parramatta Eels off a bye. We always got something to gripe about with the draw. No 5-day turnarounds for the Eels this year, but a lot of teams coming off the bye against the Parramatta Eels. The Dragons the latest here. But the Dragons' recent form, not great. And a lot of conjecture swirling around how their half should be configured. Is Kyle Flanagan holding the team back, the coach's son? I think Shane's been pretty brunt in chewing out the critics of that one there, whether you agree with him or not. But they've still got some talent in that team. And for the Eels, there are some changes, as we mentioned. But at fullback, consistency himself, Mr. Izara Yongi, the Iceman, enjoying a great year. Zach Lomax meets his former club for the second time after kicking that game-winning field goal on a broken foot back in round 5. Jordan Samrani will work the same edge as Zach Lomax there on the right, with Sean Russell and Josh Adokar down the left. Dylan Brown returns from his bullshit suspension to partner Dean Hawkins in the halves. That forces Joash Papali back to the interchange. We'll get to that shortly, though. Jack Williams, Joey Lussick, and Junior Barlow are the front row. Joey Lussick started last week 60s, but drafted into a more prolonged playing window right now because of that Riley Smith suspension. I imagine he's going to balance those dummy half responsibilities with Joash Papali, but they're probably going to call on him for 60-plus minutes here against the Red V. On the edges...
So that might even be Jermaine Hopgood.
True, Jermaine Hopgood having done that in the past. It could be Jermaine doing that. That's a good shout. With allowing Riles to keep Joash Papali available to be deployed elsewhere. But then on the edges, Kelma Tuolangi on the right, Kitione Katonga enjoying himself a great year on the left. Jermaine Hopgood, we just spoke about him. He will start the game at lock forward, could be redeployed at dummy half, wait and see. Dylan Walker leads the interchange rotation. Matt Dury, Charlie Geimer, and Joash Papali rounded out. On the extended roster, Dan Keir, Tony Mattielli, Brendan Hands, Ronald Volkman, and Samuel Louizu. Liam Kennedy, the main official here. Chris Butler is in the box. So I don't know how you feel about them. Probably some of the more neutral matchups there for the officials. We've had worse, I'll say that. We've had worse.
Yeah.
That is not a challenge, Mr. Kennedy, by the way. No, that is not a challenge.
Please, not a challenge. Don't start it, John. Don't manifest the universe.
But yeah, 5:30 p.m. kickoff in round 17. Eels looking to head into the bye off a win. Dragons looking to come out of a bye on a win. Funny little contrast there. Where do you see the key matchups? What are the key stories out of the two tales of the tape here, 60s? What do you want to talk about for round 17?
Well, obviously, it's not ideal to be missing players, and we're expecting a lot, again, I think, of Jordan Samrani, very inexperienced player. We know that he's got talent with the high ball. He's an awkward conveyance to tackle. St George, the ideal team to play against. Well, I'm not sure. Is he coming up against Moses Sully or Valentine Holmes in the centre position?
That is a good question.
I'm thinking it's probably Valentine Holmes.
Does Holmes run the right edge? I'm not trying not to conflate Holmes at Queensland with Holmes with the Dragons here.
Yeah. But look, regardless, we need Jordan to perform at his best in this one without putting too much pressure on him. I'm comfortable with the halves, John, because Dean Hawkins, the old footy dean himself, has done an outstanding job when he's been called up. Dylan Brown was more himself over probably the last 2 months than what he was at the start of the season. I'm expecting him to perform as we would like him to perform. I'm less happy with Jack Williams playing in the middle than on an edge. I think Jack Williams is a weapon on the edge.
Right centre, by the way.
Oh, okay. So, look, it's not the ideal lineup for the Eels, but what the Eels have done all season is they've been able to play into that next man up mentality. As the systems have become embedded, we're seeing less fluctuation, less difference in the way that the Eels perform. There's been a consistency of effort. There's been a consistency of fight. We still haven't got the execution perfect. There's still points that are being left out on the board. Every team leaves points out there on the field and don't convert it onto the scoreboard. But maybe we're probably those 2 or 3 mistakes away from being a very, very good team. And when you start to see traits, and I'm just doing the edit on Shelley's column at the moment, and I'm going to do a bit of a spoiler because Shelley believes she's seeing some of the Melbourne Storm traits in the manner in which we approach games. And I won't go too much into it, but I thought it was quite a valid point as I was reading through her column. Hopefully I can get that out later today, John, and for all our readers. But I think we've got those systems embedded. I like the consistency of the performances. I think those starting 13 will get the job done. So now we go to the bench. Dylan Walker, huge tick. Matt Dury, he's going to have to be that physical presence out there coming off the bench because Charlie's... Look, I thought Charlie did quite a good job. Again, I spoke before about Saxon Pryke with physicality. I think Charlie's starting to find his role in that team. He had moments with Clint sitting next to me, and I mentioned this in the instant reaction, was saying the axe, he's the new axe. The way he was dropping some of the players with really strong conventional tackles. And I just liked how busy he was in the time there.
Tick under 100 metres off the bench.
Out of the page. The stats don't jump off the page, but that eye test just said he was getting that job done really well. And Joe Ash, well, it'll be interesting this week to see how he is used because we knew he was coming into that role last week as a 5'8". He didn't overplay his hand whatsoever. He played a very conventional role as the 5'8". And it'll be interesting, as I said, to see how he's used this week. Will he come on as that dummy half? Will he be there simply as a backup in case there are any issues with the back line? Don't know, John, but what I do know is we've got plenty of positives that we can talk about with each of the players there. And the media is now recognising Isaiah Iongi as one of the premier emerging talents in the NRL.
I wouldn't say it's been a narrative shift, but it does feel like there has been like a widespread sort of acknowledgement, hasn't there, of Isaiah's status now as a rising star in the game.
Yep. I saw a little bit of a clip of Justin Horro talking about Iongi, and he rates him very highly. And he said the reason that he likes him so much is that he's not like a Reece Walsh who came in as a rookie and was setting the field on fire with all this flashy play. He said it's his all-round game.
Just balanced football.
Yeah, balance, yeah. Just the way he continues to contribute throughout a game. As I said, you couldn't ask for more than what Zach Lomax is providing for the team. Just that physical presence for a start, his near domination in the air when he's coming through. Both he and Josh Addo-Carr are really working hard with those meters that they're getting in yardage. And Josh, he's far from a big unit, but he's just working tough. Sean Russell's probably having his best pre-season ever. We're expecting a bit from Jordan Samrani, as I said this week, but he's a player of great promise. I'd probably see him more as an edge back rower now.
He's a back rower that can cover the centre position very strongly, I think, is probably the best way of looking at it.
I thought he was the lay-down selection for Will Penasini this week. Others were suggesting there might be
we toyed with the idea of putting Dylan Brown into the centres, but that was more tongue-in-cheek than anything else. Samrani was the clear, assuming he was healthy, Samrani was the clear candidate there.
Yep. We talked about the halves. Jack Williams and Junior Paulo had really strong games last week. Joey Lussick arguably had one of his best performances in recent memory. Our back rowers had some big moments in those games, like a couple of errors in the games, but also some big moments. They're strike weapons for us, both of them. And Jermaine Hopgood, again, we talked about Joey Lussick having arguably his best game in a long time. I thought that Jermaine, especially in his first stint,
if Jermaine makes that the baseline for his performances, then he is a valuable member of the top 17. And that's where he needs to be at. And then he obviously needs to find a higher ceiling too under the new structures in place under Riles. But yeah, if he's doing that week to week, I'm not going to grumble. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to say you're doing your job, mate, and you're paving the way for Dylan Walker to come on and be the more extravagant, more exciting player, but you're laying the road for him to do the work there.
Yeah, so how do we win this, John? Last week I said the last thing that we need to do is play touch football against the Titans. We came out there, certainly the first half.
Played a bit of touch football, but somehow managed to cobble together a lead. Yeah, that was, look, frustrating and impressive in equal parts there.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm thinking that this shifting the ball around, the amount that we do, is the style that Jason Riles wants to play.
Very, very positive in how he wants to present the football, yeah. A lot of interchange between forwards and halves. We see Junior Barlow being a fulcrum, particularly when we're attacking the right edge. You'll see him pivot through contact and get that offload away to whether it's Moses or Hawkins, whoever's the primary playmaker.
Or Riley.
Yep. I would like to see Azara Yongi sniffing around that capacity too. I feel like there's some real big opportunities for him as a player running off of Junior. But yeah, we are going to play positive football. We're not afraid to roll our sleeves up and be physical. By the same token, but clearly Riles, Brown, Wisemantle, Moa, in all various capacities, chiming in for the shape of the attacking structures. They want the Eels being expansive and being aggressive with the ball in hand.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to have to adjust some of my thinking because I honestly thought that we could steamroll the Titans because the Titans they've never liked an arm wrestle, the Titans. If you're prepared to get physical with them, you're going to steamroll them. But we got the job done being expansive. So I don't know what we're going to do this week, John. Honestly, I don't. I think this is the style of football that we're going to play. And I think really the key to it is minimising mistakes if we're going to play this type of football. As you said, maybe looking for other opportunities like Isaiah Iongi being there to run off the likes of Junior. We'd like to see that. But probably if we see these systems continue to embed, players fulfill their role as they need to, they should get the job done. And I don't see the Dragons as being too different to, in terms of the challenge, to what the Titans were last week. Even without players, John, I think we get the job done, because I think there's bigger question marks about a number of those St George players. And it's probably highlighted by Kyle Flanagan. And then you maybe start to add in a couple of other players who maybe have got an error or two in them. We know the King is going to work his ass off.
Look, we saw it in the round 5 clash where he always gives you everything he's got as a fullback and as a player, but he gave a little bit extra against Parramatta in that game. 2 tries, heavily involved, been on ball, and was certainly fired up. And I wouldn't say his form's tapered off 60s, but I do feel like we're at the point of the season where his ability to push through the pain threshold is taking a toll. We saw that with Parramatta in recent years, where he's an absolute soldier and he will give you everything. But this part of the season is where the attrition really starts to weigh down on a bloke that has had a lot taken from him in terms of injuries. And I feel like maybe the Eels can exploit that with some smart kicking, but we have to wait and see.
John, the area where I think we have to really watch out for St George is around our ruck defence, because both Cook and Little will exploit.
Yep.
And also the King. He'll look for opportunities
that's
around.
That's where he scored one of his tries, was from dummy half on the goal.
Yeah. That's so I honestly am concerned about what they might throw at us around dummy half, especially close to the line. I think they will look for snap opportunities there. We need to be at our best defensively around there. It's probably, if I'm concerned about one area this year, it's been that there's been a few soft tries around that. I reckon the Dragons are going to try to play us through the middle and try to get back behind the ruck, dig back in, angled runs there. That'd be my tip for how they're going to play the game. So I just think we need to be up to the challenge defensively. I think we'll create opportunities ourselves, but be up to the challenge defensively around the ruck for how they're going to direct the play there. So, John, I think it's time for our predictions. I'll let you lead off.
Yeah, Parramatta Eels got to get the back-to-back wins here, right, mate? I know it is a tough road trip going down to the Gong and taking on a team in the Dragons under Flanagan that want to get you in a scrap. They're almost the opposite of the Titans, who wanted to play touch football. The Dragons want you in a scrap. They want to drag you down to that level and beat you with flano ball, which is a hallmark of what Shane Flanagan did at both Cronulla here and now in the Dragons when they've been able to upset teams like the Melbourne Storm this year. They want it to be a real struggle, a real grind. And maybe I would say that's where the Eels also thrive, because the Eels are in this weird position where we talked about they want to play positive football, but they also, if you listen to the messaging Jason Ryles makes in his post-game presses, they also want to be able to scrap. So balancing that duality is going to be the key here. Can they scrap with the Dragons while also playing some positive football? Get that balance right. I think that they can win and win well. I'm going to go for a good Parramatta win here. I know there's no Moses. I know there's a couple of suspensions there of Will Penasini, who, classic Parramatta, plays his best game of the season by some margin, gets suspended for 3 games. And Riley Smith. Parramatta to win 34-10. So a pretty solid win there. And then first try scorer for the Blue and Gold. Where are we going this week? First try scorer for the Blue and Gold. Let's go with Kitione Katonga. Go for the back row there. And then best on field, again, there's some obvious candidates. Azara Yongi's been in red hot form. Zach Lomax against his former club is another great shout. But let's keep it a little bit spicy. You know what? I've put the boot in this year. So building on one of his more consistent performances this year, Jermaine Hopgood. Big game from the number 13.
Whoa.
Yeah, let's
that is keeping it spicy, John.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for back-to-back 36-20 score.
Deja vu.
I went 34-18 last week, so it wasn't too far off. I liked that 16-point margin. I'll go with that again. First try scorer. I think this week I'll go for Dylan Brown to be first try scorer. Best on field, I'm again going to go for back-to-back performances from Isaiah Iongi.
It's just, I know it's like a bit of a cheat code, but it is such a sensible pick. He's doing such fantastic work at the back. We're integrating him into our attacking structures in really key ways, which is good work from the coaching staff. That is very, straightforward but effective stuff. Yeah, I think if you're putting your money down on the man of the match, I think Iongi is probably the smarter bet. But I'm sending the positive energy to Jermaine Hopgood and looking for him to build on what we saw last week.
Look, I think that's an absolutely great shout there, John. If I can't get mine across the line, my Isaiah Iongi pick, I'll be more than happy if Jermaine rises to the occasion and gets the job done there. So that brings us to the conclusion of this preview. Thank you for everyone for sticking around. I think we've zeroed in on about the hour and a half mark in terms of our reaction to the signing and also to 3 grades of previews. So if you've stuck around to the end, we're really, really happy with that. A reminder, no matter what platform you're listening or watching this on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, and especially with YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you can just hit that subscribe and notification button, that'd be brilliant. Again, our thanks to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and to Paraleagues, the home of the Eels. Don't forget our TCT watch party.
Baby.
Yeah, the 25th of July, round 21, away game against the Broncos, kicking off at 7 o'clock. Free entry, free food, $5 beers from the beer of the month, and just hang out with fellow Eels supporters. Come and say g'day, maybe meet some of the people who are the regular contributors on TCT, either writing or replying. Just get to know part of your community, your Eels supporting community, or maybe meet some new people that we haven't met before. Maybe there's going to be some people who just happen to be tuning into this for the first time and thought, I like the cut of
these two bozos aren't too bad. I suppose you could come say hello. Yeah. Look, we've had so many amazing people come up and introduce themselves to us in the last couple of years and in the last couple of months especially. And, yeah, fantastic community that we're helping build here with everyone's help. And it'd be great to have some people turn up to the watch party. So come out and watch Parramatta Eels smoke the Broncos.
Absolutely. And, John, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.